Ivy Valentine subscribes to Mark Yoon, so should you. Enjoy your treat!
Relevance can be a big issue and can also be the deciding factor between whether a game fails or whether a game continues to go on in succession. And I think that it's like a really interesting topic to actually cover, because what is relevant to some people may not be relevant to other people, but generally speaking, just still the idea of whatever thing being in the minds of people, or people still carrying that torch forward, is usually how I consider it being relevant. Like, does it still have the same base or near the same base that it did when it launched, or is it still continuing to try to garner more importance? Is it still trying to, be in tournaments and just make itself be known out there, not just being dead in the water? That's a huge thing. And when it comes to like SoulCalibur, this conversation happens and brings up all the time. I'll see people a lot mention that like SoulCalibur is dead or whatever, and SoulCalibur 6's thriving online community may not be at the heights that it was at its peak. I mean, the game did come out in 2018 and it's pretty old by now. So surely the numbers on Steam are going to drop. On consoles, I don't know how long it is to take a match, because usually like whenever we do matches and tournaments and stuff, we usually set it up on the Discord, so I don't really have to worry about that. But beyond like the actual initial numbers game of like who's actually playing it at what time, there's still a lot of things that go into the game being relevant. This conversation happens a lot when I'm talking about SoulCalibur 7 and things that like I want to see in it. People will be like, well, SoulCalibur 7 isn't confirmed, and like we don't even know if the series is alive, which is bull. You can check out like all my other old videos and just make up your mind for yourself. But there's a few reasons that I wanted to talk about, and the newest reason that I want to actually discuss is SoulCalibur 6's inclusion in the tournament EVO coming up in this year in 2023. EVO is usually focused on Japanese fighting games, obviously, but it's still having relevance, and actually being on the docket for a tournament is a pretty big deal. Like, that still shows that the game is relevant and that people are still playing the game, or people at least have interest in seeing the game, or at least people interested in voting for that game. Because even though fighting games are kind of a niche thing within video games themselves, not all games get showcased at these tournaments. Like, there's a ton of fighting games out there, especially over the course of the PlayStation 4's life cycle and now the PlayStation 5, but there's games out there that like obviously are timeless, like Marvel vs. Capcom 2 and stuff like that. So while I don't think that SoulCalibur 7 will actually be announced at EVO 2023, because I do think we're a little bit still a ways away, I do see this as a positive net in the way that like it's still garnering attention and still being played, if that makes any sense to you. I think they'll probably do their own event, or they'll just release a couple trailers before the game actually comes out. I don't think they're going to spend too much time or budget on marketing, just because the fact that they need that marketing budget, they need that budget for the overall like package of the initial game itself. So we want them to focus more on that, and this game will probably just have to travel more from tournaments and like word of mouth and whatever spots they can get on interviews and stuff on like Bandai Namco's channel and things like that. Maybe they're like their Twitter or whatever, X or whatever. But I don't know. The tournaments I think are a good thing. Another part that makes me still have hope is like the relevance issue. Like, while they haven't given us updated numbers based on sales, we do know that like a year or two ago it passed 2 million, in which I think it was like 2 years ago actually, in which it passed 2 million copies physically sold. That's physically, not digitally, because a lot of the stores don't report their numbers digital wise, especially like, Microsoft and stuff like that. Like, they won't, there's like only 2 industries that'll actually report on like the game sales, like Famitsu, and like there's one other one, but like they don't actually get information from those companies. That's all stuff that they keep close to them. I don't know why, but I think more transparency is better in that case. But let's just go with 2 million physical sales. This is at least, because we can't say that in the last 2 years nobody's purchased SoulCalibur physically, right? I mean, that's absurd. Like, of course it has. Whether it garners enough to reach that 3 million mark or not is left to be seen. And now that Okubo is working on other projects, and SoulCalibur 7, probably while being in development, is looking for another lead producer to push the marketing on the game, or at least have an online presence, we're not going to know that information, especially if they're focused on the next game, unless they're putting it out there as just like a thank you, we're working on the game, here you go. But beyond that, there's other ways that like it can be relevant in its scarcity. Like, what I mean by that is like there's not very many weapons-based fighting games out there. Like, sure, Mortal Kombat uses like weapons occasionally, like especially when it did for like variations and stuff. And some characters automatically come with weapons, like you'll see in Mortal Kombat 1, you have Rain using the staff and whatnot. Like, a lot of the characters have like dedicated weapons that they usually use, but it's not like in their baked-in move set, if that makes sense. They're not primarily using the weapon. They will use it for certain moves, but it's not weapon-based. When I think of weapon-based, I think of games like Bushido Blade, Samurai Showdown, SoulCalibur, but there's not many out there. So, especially in the modern community and with the numbers that it pulls, it still stands above the rest when it comes to that. Because as much as I like Samurai Showdown, it doesn't do anywhere near the numbers that SoulCalibur does. But I think that that's another thing that's going to keep it still relevant and fresh, is that like there's no competition in that market. Because it's not particularly a game that goes head-to-head with other games and just like completely gets blown out of the water, you know what I mean? Like, when you compare that to like Tekken, you're still completely comparing two completely different things. Like, Tekken mainly uses like fist fighting and martial arts and will straight up transform into like devils and stuff like that, which you do have the Manifested in like SoulCalibur, but it's primarily just based on the weapon usage and the 8-way run system of how you get around, and the character creation stuff and the unique storytelling abilities. Like, those are all things that make SoulCalibur what it is. So I don't think it's fair to compare them too much, but I can see why somebody would, because they're under the Bandai Namco umbrella. But I think Project Soul also does a really good job with being innovative, which is probably the last reason I have for its relevance. Anecdotes aside, like, we get awesome things that like people still clamor for, like the character creation system, which I know is not for everybody, but it's about 50% of the player base at least only purchases the game for the character creation. So there's like a huge market for that there, and if you take away that character creation, you're taking away that 50% potential customer base. I'm sure probably around like 20 to 30% will still purchase the game anyway, just because of nostalgia or what the game is, but most people are not going to put as much time into it as possible, and that's the only thing that like really gives the game longevity, honestly. Beyond that, like, it's innovative with the 8-way run system and its defensive systems, like the perfect guards, parrying, stuff like that. Like, these are all things that have been in other games, but like, I think SoulCalibur not only headlines at some points, but it also does them in a different way to make it unique to SoulCalibur. When you're playing SoulCalibur, it doesn't quite feel like you're playing any other fighting game. A lot of other fighting games can feel like samey, or feel like you're playing a game with a different skin, especially when it comes to like quarter circle forward games. Like, there's not a huge difference in my eyes for the actual fighting mechanics when you're playing like Blaze Blue versus like Street Fighter, right? Like, there's a lot of that like sameness to it, but I know they're totally different and they do their own thing, but I think the innovation in SoulCalibur is what sets it apart. So, I don't know, those are just a couple reasons that I think that it's still relevant, but let me know what you think in the comment section down below. But now it is time to get to our poll from the last video. And the poll actually states, would you like SoulCalibur 7 to handle unique character dialogue? And then I gave a few examples. New way, which means unique character dialogue in new ways, 14%. Similar to how it was in SoulCalibur 3 and etc., 38%. Mortal Kombat 1 and Justice 2 style, 41%, which is the lead, and only in arcade, and a pre-fight loading screen. See, if this was for me, I would have chosen similar to SoulCalibur 3, which is the second option. And you can see some comments here while we're talking. But I made an entire video about why I don't want it to be like Mortal Kombat 1 or Injustice 2 style, which is hilarious that that's the one that won, but I mean, my opinion is not the end-all be-all, like everyone else has their own opinion also. So I just like I'm missing like SoulCalibur 2 and stuff like that, how you can do something similar to what you can now in Street Fighter 6, where the characters can like yell phrases at each other on the loading screen, or being able to do things like that in a loading screen. And I had a couple really good comments about how they can innovate that further, but that would just be my opinion. But anyway, guys, that's gonna be the video for today. Thank you for watching, and thank you for helping me pass 2,000 subscribers. Any all thoughts are always welcome in the comment section down below. You can continue the conversation down there, or you can bring it over to my Discord, which you can find a link in the channel of the description box below. And as I always say, guys, I love it. Thank you.
And thank you.